Hello and welcome to today's presentation. Today we're talking about benchmarking your horse's behaviour, and I'm going to introduce you to the Equine Behaviour Assessment and Research Questionnaire known as E-BARQ. My name's Kate Fenner. I'm a lecturer at the University of Queensland, and E-BARQ is a collaboration between the Universities of Queensland, Sydney and New England, and it's something that you can get involved with today. And in this presentation I'm going to tell you how you can do that and why you should. Our barometer for success has often been competition, and during COVID that's been quite difficult because we haven't been going out to as many competitions as we used to. So what about also those people that don't compete with their horses? And there's certainly a lot of riders and horse owners that don't go to competition. How do they measure their horse's success, or how do they keep track of their horse's behaviour? And could, in fact, behaviour be a barometer of success? Why do we care about behaviour? Do you think that behaviour impacts performance? Do you think that perhaps it impacts safety? The impact on safety is often very obvious. However, it's possible that we could address behavioural problems earlier if we knew they were coming. Did this horse, for example, start rearing all of a sudden? Or was it throwing its head up, backing off, or not going forward, or even moving backwards for several days, weeks, or perhaps even months before this event? We hear a lot that, horses are unpredictable, but in reality, horses learn patterns very well, and they're very good at learning where the release of pressure comes in. So these behaviours develop over time and get more and more pronounced as they're inadvertently reinforced by the handler or the rider. We can see that behaviours such as this one, rearing, are clearly very dangerous for the rider. But what are the implications for horse welfare of this type of behaviour? Horses whose behaviour deteriorates to the extent of this rearing behaviour, for example, end up at the sale yards or being sold to a dealer or unsuspecting novice rider. The welfare of these same horses is often compromised because owners make assumptions about their horse's motivations for behaving in this way. For example, he's trying to get me off, or they're trying to hurt me, or perhaps he knows what I want but he's just stubborn. These assumptions lead the rider or handler to becoming very reactive, and most often results in punishment. This is where the rider or handler waits for the horse to make a mistake and then corrects it. Now, I use the word correction here, but it means the same as punishment. It's just a nicer word, and you can tell whether something is a correction or reinforcement. It's a correction or a punishment if you're trying to make that behaviour less likely to happen in the future. If you want a behaviour to be more likely to happen in the future, then you're most likely using reinforcement. So this type of reactive training makes the horse's life very unpredictable. And as horses love predictability, this often leads to a further deterioration of behaviour. It's important to remember that horses are hardwired not to show distress. If horses show distress, it makes them very vulnerable to predators in the wild. I remember a few years ago when we did this noseband study, and we were looking at various tightnesses of nosebands. Now, we video recorded the horse's behaviour, and we took physiological and behavioural measurements as well. And just watching the horses though during the experiment, it was impossible to tell which horses might have been reacting poorly to the tight treatment. And so you can see here the purple line in the first graph. The first graph is heart rate, and you can see with those horses with the tight nosebands, that's the NAUN, no area under the nosebands, their heart rates went way up during the treatment, which is when the noseband was tightened, and they started to come down in the recovery section when the bridle and noseband were taken off the horse. You see the same thing for swallowing. The horses with the very tight nosebands on, the no area under the noseband, and the half the conventional area under the noseband, so that's one finger under the noseband, they had trouble swallowing during the treatment, and that rebounded right back to normal levels when the bridle was taken off. And these are things, you know, we don't count how many times our horses swallow when we're doing things, but it turns out that if you clamp their mouth closed, not only do they find it very difficult to swallow, and this trial went on for 10 minutes with the nosebands tightened, also their heart rates are going up. And we also found in this experiment that their eye temperatures increased as well. So these are things that you really can't see. So it's important that we learn about those behavioral responses that tell us the horse is not comfortable or is in distress. So what might be some signs? Well, we can see tail swishing. That's obvious. This horse here is bucking. That's very obvious. Horses not going forward. Horses not stopping. So it's important that we learn to benchmark and monitor our horse's behavior. And it's the best time to start is now. And this is why we constructed E-BARQ. E-BARQ's been in development for over 12 years now at the University of Sydney. To learn a little bit more about E-BARQ, you can go along to www.e-barq.com. E-BARQ is free to use, and it's available to horse owners and caregivers, all horse owners and caregivers, of all different types of horses. So all breeds, all sizes, all ages. So go along and learn more about the development of E-BARQ at ebarq.com, and then click Take E-BARQ Now, and that's going to take you along to a website where you can make your own account. Now, this is the first page you'll see. All we need is your name, your email address, and you can have a free account, and you can enter as many horses as you like. So you'll come into this first page, My Horses, and here you can see top right, you can add a horse, and then once you've added a horse, you can also edit a horse. So on the edit page here, the only thing you need to put in on this page is the horse's name. Now, let's say the horse is called Rocky. You could just put Rocky in and then press Save Changes, and Rocky will be registered. If you have his year of birth, put that in. If you want to put his breed registration number in there, pop that in as well. It's a good place. You know where it is then if you ever need it. You can also click on the little plus signs here, and you can upload photographs of your horse. So you've got a full side profile, you've got the head profile, and then the front of the horse's face. The final box here is group membership, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about groups in a moment, but just know here that you can enter a group code if you're in a group, but you must press the little plus button after that to register the group, and don't forget to press Save Changes on this page or your horse won't be registered. So here we are with the group code. So you can see here we've got, this was the Equestrian Australia members. Don't use that code if you're not an Equestrian Australia member, but if you are, of course, do that, and then press the plus and then press Save Changes. Now, groups can be formed by anybody who thinks they might have at least 10 horses to go into their group. So it might be a riding group, it could be a social group, it could be a rescue organization, it could be a breeder, it could be a particular breed of horse, it could be a riding school, it could be any Facebook group that you had, anywhere that you wanted to compare horses in your group to the population of horses. And all you need to do, well, we'll look at that in a minute actually, because there's a special page where you can form your own group. So we'll talk about that in more detail later. If you already have a group though, pop the code in there, press the plus sign and press Save Changes. Now, E-BARQ is quite a long survey. It's going to take you 20 or 30 minutes to complete your first one. After that, you'll get a bit quicker because you'll get used to how the questions run, and they're all multiple choice. So it's a range of sort of 5 answers from 0 to not at all to 5 to all the time, and there's always a not applicable answer possibility for you. At the end of it, you're going to get, your horse will be given a graph. Now this will show your horse's behaviour in comparison to the E-BARQ population in 13 different categories. Only 12 categories if you've got a non-ridden horse. So if your horse hasn't been ridden in the last 6 months, you won't do the rideability question, so you don't get a rating there. But still the trainability, boldness, compliance, and so on, you'll get all of those. Now you can see here that this horse took this in September 21, and those are the dark green results on top. And then just below that, you can see the E-BARQ population. So this is this horse's results, September 21, and that's the total E-BARQ population. So you can see this horse just, he does quite well in handling compliance, like quite a bit above the population, but he's doing very poorly in boldness, and he's also not doing very well in non-human social confidence or novel object confidence. So those are 3 areas that clearly this horse needs some work in. Now here's another view. This is the same horse. You can see his September 21 results, and you can see he's lacking in boldness, non-human social confidence, and novel object confidence. But here we're showing 3 of his results. So we've got October 19, May 2020, and September 21. So September's the most recent ones on top, and then they go down as they get more historic. And as you can see, this horse has changed quite a lot. So his May results were much better than his September results. And this is quite interesting. And this is very interesting for, you know, when you move a horse, for example. So what had happened was this horse was basically out and not doing very much, not being interacted very much with before, so up to the May results. And then he came in, he moved to a new property, and he was having to come in and meet a new herd and all of those things. So he started his behavior in certain areas, so the confidence and the boldness reduced. So for the owner, that's a really helpful graph, because you say, oh, okay, well, you know, he's really not feeling confident and he's not feeling very bold. So what can I do? What exercises can I do to help this horse at this time in his training? So here's how you can create your own group. So under your profile, you can see it's the 3rd tab. So create a group, and then you can just fill out the little form here. So you name your group, select what type it is. It might be a riding school, it might be a social group, it might be a breed group or a rescue group. And then estimate the group size. Now, just to warn you here, we need at least 10. So if you write in and say, I've only got 5 horses, I'm not going to give you a group, because we need 10, because it's not really meaningful unless you've got sort of a minimum of 10. But having said that, as soon as we've got 50% of your estimated size, we will start to give you the results. And so until we've got 50%, there's no point in giving you a group average. But as soon as we've got 50%, we'll start giving you a group average, and I'll show that in a minute. So be careful when you estimate your size, because let's say you estimate your size as 12. When we've got 6, you'll start seeing the group average, so you can compare that to the population, which is going to look like this graph here. So there we are. Now we can see the September results for this same horse, and we can see the total E-BARQ population, which is, again, that's the beige colored one. And then the light green one is the group, and this is a training group. And so we can see that group's average, and that we can see that group's average compared to the horse, the population, and of course, the whole E-BARQ population. So that's really helpful for us. So E-BARQ has already got some very interesting results. We've been looking at all the data that we've accumulated, and we've found some really interesting things. And I encourage you to go along to the website www.e-barq.com and have a look. And there's click-throughs to all of the papers that have been published. They are also published in open access magazines, so that you journals, so that you can go along and get those for yourself and download them. The first one, we looked at the behavioural differences between mares and geldings, and we often hear that mares are difficult and bossy and all of these things. So we often assume that mares are going to be moody or difficult under saddle, but we actually didn't find any differences in mares and geldings under saddle, although we found a few differences in mares and geldings on the ground. One was that geldings were more likely to chew on lead ropes and rugs, and the other one was that mares are more likely to be difficult to catch or walk away when you're trying to catch them. This was an interesting study where we looked at the sex of the handler and the rider on the reported social confidence, compliance and touch sensitivity of horses. So here we found that horses that were ridden and handled by males were more likely to be difficult to catch, but more compliant under saddle. In this study we looked at age-related changes in behaviour. So as the horse ages, do the behaviours change? We found indeed they did. Now, this was another interesting study where we looked at the number of different riders that a horse is exposed to. And what we found was that the responses to acceleration, so going faster cues or moving cues, they were less responsive to those cues, as well as they were more responsive, to deceleration cues. So they were harder to get going, but easier to stop if you had more different riders. And this was also a very interesting study. We were looking here at the associations between unwanted ridden behaviours and in-hand behaviours. So this horse here, for example, it's just being led, but it's rearing. Is this likely to translate to a problem under saddle? And we've had some really interesting findings here, particularly about horses that were difficult to load on trailers and how that is reflected in behavioural problems under saddle. I encourage you to go and have a look at that article. So we know that people won't always tell the truth, but as E-BARQ becomes better known, it will become like a trust currency, a bit like Airbnb or Uber. And we feel that will develop. So red flags will become horses with no E-BARQ results, or horses with glowing E-BARQ results that were completed last week. Let's say you're going to buy a horse and it doesn't have an E-BARQ result. Well, you may or may not believe what the seller is telling you. But if you go and buy a horse, or go to look at a horse that's got one E-BARQ result that was taken last week and it's scored top on every category, that might be a red flag to you. I think it should be. If, on the other hand, you go and look at a horse that has, say, 3 E-BARQ results, or at least 2 E-BARQ results, and they show some improvement or they show some changes that the owner can explain to you, I think that would be a green flag for me, knowing that the horse has been well cared for, has been monitored, and they can show some proof of that they have been taking care of the horse and they've been interested in the horse's training and behaviour. So we have this tool. It's freely available to all horse caregivers. And when we consider how closely horse behaviour is linked to human safety, it's imperative that we all embrace and engage with E-BARQ for the future sustainability of equestrian sports. So I encourage you to use it, and don't forget to sign up for the newsletter just down here on the right hand side of the Contact Us page to keep up with all the latest E-BARQ findings. Thank you.